but why don't we get started? Um, so the first thing is I'm really excited to have Dave join us. I got was introduced to Dave through Yako at Winning by Design. You know, Yako's the founder there. He used to be VP of sales of one of our companies, and have been working with him for a long time, from actually day one at Winning by Design when it started in our office. So I had lunch with Yako, and he passed me this book, freemium. And, I'm always interested in new go-to-market ideas. And he said it was really good. So I started reading it, and I was really impressed. It's rare to have a book that can go from high level to low level, high level that can appeal to like board issues, but at the same time, make it operational for, I think, just working level people to drive individual PLG metrics and so forth. So really like that. And so with that, I asked Yako for an introduction to Dave. And through that, I thought it would be really good to sort of share Dave's thoughts about PLG with the broader audience, and also provide an opportunity where they can reach out and contact him directly. So that's the introduction, and maybe first, Dave, just talk about yourself, because you've been involved in go-to-market in multiple companies, and what led you to PLG.
Dang, Tae, I'm not in the market for back cover endorsements, but I wish I were. That
Okay.
was good. Thank you for reading it. It really was a cool journey to write it. I mean, we don't have to spend a lot of time on my background, but I did first significant company that we sold to Oracle, and the average ACV for that company, it was a company called Profit Logic out of Boston. Average ACV when we sold it to Oracle was $1.2 million. Next company I built and sold, the average ACV was $1.2 thousand. We built that out of Mountain View. Those are two very, very, very different go-to-market motions, and I had to completely retool when I went from Boston to Silicon Valley and went from 1.2 million to 1.2 thousand. And PLG wasn't really an acronym at the time, but self-service was, and the consumerization of enterprise software was. That was actually the median 1.2 thousand, not the mean. We had some very, very big customers that skewed the mean up from there. But you had to figure out how to get stuff, Tehi, you know, activatable with no human intervention.
Hmm.
And that was a brand new motion for me. And the more that I kind of studied it, the more I realized I think the long-term trend is towards self-service. Like I think it went from e-commerce to mobile to SaaS to to now AI enabled, and every one of those steps is kind of helping customers get their hands on the product earlier, easier, cheaper, faster, and I don't see that trend ending anytime soon. So that's what inspired me to write freemium.
And following up on that, I mean, I think all of us in the audience want to do PLG. We see the benefits and the value, the power of PLG. The question is sort of how to do it.
Right.
So it's something that we want, but how? And maybe we start with from the work you've done, sort of the challenges that a startup CEO has in trying to implement PLG, maybe the board level conversations, and just the perspective. Because one key observation I remember in your book is if you want to go to PLG, it'll just take you longer. Just accept the fact it'll take you longer to like get to 1 million AR.
Yeah, it does. And I'd be curious for the just for the people on the call, if you're in front of a keyboard and you can do this, I'm about to hit send on a chat. Um, that first number is represents an ARR number, and then the numbers in brackets represent ACV numbers. Like assuming I have two go-to-market motions, like an SMB that's 20K and an enterprise that's 125K. Could you just put your business in there, like how big your business is right now, and if you have one go-to-market motion, what's the ACV? If you have two, what are those two? And then I'll get a sense of who we're talking about, who we're talking to. I really appreciate it, Tahi. Uh, Indeed, it is going to take some time, and that time is going to require some commitment. And I think that commitment, you brought up the CEO. Let's say the CEO wants to do it. That's the very, very best case. CEO wants to do it. Now, as the CEO, you need to get in your head that it is going to take some time. But what doesn't work, what I've seen not work, is when people try to do PLG in silos. Like it's sponsored by marketing, marketing's going to do it on their own. It's sponsored by product's going to do a little kind of, skunk works test. Um, because in PLG you've got to get product and marketing working kind of in the same room. Like engineering and marketing are working kind of together, and inevitably there's going to be some kind of, if you do it in a silo, there's going to be some tie break required. Marketing's going to say, hey, I need access to XYZ, or engineering is going to say, hey, I need access to XYZ, and then the CEO is going to have to tie break. And if she isn't committed, she'd say, why don't we just go back to what we know? But if she is committed, if it's sponsored from there, then you have a shot. And to your point, I got to maintain that commitment over an amount of time period that's long enough for me to see the fruits of my labor. So I need CEO commitment.
And does the CEO, and in the book, you outline a certain path to executing PLG properly. And you mentioned that it's based on like three commitments. And if you could maybe expand on that for the audience.
Yeah, it's a great topic. I mean, one of the reasons we all want to get to PLG is, 'cause one definition I love of PLG is that it's delaboring the go to market. So, it's taking labor out, it's removing kind of manual labor and replacing it with automated labor. Same way we did with lean manufacturing. Um, and when you think about it that way, then PLG and AI led growth are they're both attacking the same thing. We're taking labor out on the selling side and we're giving easier access on the buying side. Okay, so cool. So let's say we want to build a product that is that can deliver impact without any intervention from humans. Then there's kind of like three things that get me in the mindset of that with no irony whatsoever. The first one is empathy. And I learned this when I moved to Silicon Valley, like because I stayed on at Oracle. When we sold that company to Oracle, I stayed on for 4.5 years, and I left just before going native. But Oracle has zero empathy. They've had an empathy ectomy, I think, at some point. They're literally trying to surround and control their customers. At least that was how it was 15 years ago. But empathy is understanding the end user. Like I really need to understand the end user. I need to understand how she defines progress in her job. Need to understand what she's trying to achieve. And then once I do, if I'm really in her shoes, then I channel the next thing, which is generosity. I say, "Oh, that's what you're trying to do? Here, see if this helps." And I literally just offer that to her. These are two things that are very hard, Tehi, like they're mindset shifts
Mhm.
from a commercial standpoint, but they're going to lead to long-term monetization and retention. So empathy, understand your end user, generosity, let them get started with the product without any commitment from them. I'm going to build towards habit, right? And then the third thing is um, because I have no human in the room while she's experiencing my product, I've got to have that product instrumented and I've got to track metrics. I got to see where she's succeeding, where she's failing, where she's getting stuck, what features she's discovering and using, which ones she's not discovering, even though I wanted her to be using them. And then anytime I see friction, I'm going to see it in the metrics. And then I'm going to go experiment my way to kind of to uh, smooth out that friction point and make sure I've got kind of the customer journey behaving the way that I want it. That's the mindset, Tehi, behind all of it. If the CEO is committed to empathy, generosity, and metrics, then after that, I just have to put really good talent on it, and I got to give it gestation period, the amount of time. The rest of the playbook's been written. Like, we know how to do this. There's 40 public companies that have been built based on PLG. It has been written. It's literally in the book, freemium, to your point. It's not in necessarily tactically and then next step, next step, next step. That's going to be specific to your market. But framework wise, the playbook is there for how to build and optimize a self-service go-to-market motion. But you got to have the right mindset: empathy, generosity, metrics, and then you got to put talent on it and let them run.
And so let's drill into that a little bit, Dave. And that is, you got to get that mindset of empathy, generosity, and metrics. And with that, what are like some of the key North Star metrics that you say that the team should focus on versus you call the vanity metrics? And then the other part is in the book, you also specifically outline a type of team structure, a cross-functional team that you think will be essential to execute, to build the right PLG motion.
Yeah, well, let's take a little time on the metrics because metrics and patience or go hand in hand. You talked about the kind of time frame. If I denominate my y-axis in ARR dollars, which is how I'm running my whole business, I'm measuring my efforts in terms of how do I grow that number, right? And so if I'm saying, hey, I want to launch PLG and I think it's going to grow in 1 year, the answer is it's probably not. Like, it may as well not start because it takes 1 to 3 years for me to start seeing ARR show up. 1 to 3 years. Like, and 3 years is not a failure. You look at a lot of the PLG companies if they're getting started, they're spending 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then obviously, granted, they're finding product market fit during a lot of those years, but it takes me some time. So what do I put on that y-axis, Tahi? I think that's the question. Like, how do I know if something's working or not? And for me, the key North Star metric is usage. Turns out usage is a really useful metric even in a traditional SaaS business. Like, if we could see usage in the boardroom, we would have leading indicator on retention, would have a leading indicator on expansion, because usage is a user trading her time for some benefit she's getting out of using that solution. If I don't see users coming back, it's because they're not getting value. And that means that's a attrition in the front windshield, and that's certainly not an expansion. So I would like usage as a leading indicator in any business, but in PLG, that's the earliest thing that I'm going to see. I want to see initial activation, and then I want to see that customer coming back next week, and then I want to see her coming back the following week. So we talk about usage retention. Usage retention is a leading indicator of dollar retention. And I can see that way sooner. So let's say I get someone activated. I'm going to measure. In PLG, we don't have to get into the details here. I'm not going to like nerd out. You can do it in the book, but we're acquiring, then we're activating, then we're achieving first impact, then we're developing habit, then we're monetizing. So they're literally using before monetizing in many of these models. And then we're going for usage, long-term usage retention, dollar retention, and expansion. Those are kind of like the funnel metrics in PLG. But the very first one, once I've got somebody activated, is I want them to first impact, and then I want to retain their usage. And within months, I can know whether each successive cohort of new users is succeeding better than the last cohort, and I can know when I get to a threshold where it says, hey, I think this thing is working, we're going to be able to make this thing go. And that's way before I see dollars on the y-axis. Is that making sense in the way I've explained it there? Any follow-ups?
And by the way, if the audience have any questions you'd like to ask Dave specifically about any
Please.
particular metric, please feel free
Yeah,
to as
no,
well.
it's just, there's only like 20 of us, and 6 or 7 of us are robots, so we can have a little conversation.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
We do not have a PLG motion at all right now. Just
Yep.
for context. First impact is something though that we have definitely been trying to measure in a more accurate way. And just curious on any experience you have on like how to. It seems so simple, and I think like we've gotten the advice like when's first impact, and it's been harder in practice. We're a workforce planning product for the construction industry than I think it is in theory. And I'm just curious like how you've approached that with teams, or if you've been with products that it's just like very obvious what that first impact is.
Okay. So your customer is a construction company?
Yeah, so construction companies we sell to typically like the VP or director of operations. So they're, a senior level team member. And instead of their workforce planning being like on whiteboards and using magnets and Excel spreadsheets, it's a consolidated view of their workforce plan. But it's a very collaborative exercise. Like
Is the
it's not like
buyer and user the same person?
often, not as we get to more enterprise, then it kind of splits. But for like a mid-market, it is.
And Dave, maybe if you don't mind, if you can explain why you asked that question about buyer and user.
Yeah, for sure. Um, it's just easier. Like if the buyer and user are the same person, then um, I'm attracting the same person into the funnel that I'm converting. Sometimes that's not true. And then I'm converting the same person that I'm then getting to first impact. Sometimes that's not true. Those are we can deal with the other situation, but if I've got kind of the same person making the decision as is going to get first impact, I don't have to shift gears or find a new person. It's just easier. So Mallory, it makes sense that I'm not going to be PLG on an acquisition basis, unless I were to develop some different value prop and I could get that price down. Because probably that head of ops has got to go find approvals. So this is not going to be a pure hands-off thing, at least not past the trial stage. Um, but let's assume that we've got the contract and now we just want to get to first impact. That's what you're talking about. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I think this is what you just said is frustrating, but I have to make a decision on which event is the first time that whoever my kind of head of workforce planning is, my head of ops or whatever, that she goes, oh man, yes, that's great. Is it publishing a schedule? Is it I don't know, that's what I'm thinking. It's probably publishing a schedule, like getting all the various inputs and availability and publishing my first schedule. I'm like, wow, that was way easier than magnets and post-its. Is that
We've
my
said like the first workforce planning meeting that they run with our solution, up on the screen. So yeah, very similar to what you like at that point, it's kind of like their first plan that they've created.
perfect?
Um, yeah.
Perfect. So if I can instrument that in some way as an event in my software, like the first time the plan goes to whatever, like approve stage or publish stage, or I don't know if you could tell when it was up on a screen, that would be even better. I don't know if you probably can't, but I want to instrument that event as an event, and then I want to start measuring the time from activation to first impact. And I want to, in my head, say how much patience does um, I'll just call our customer Lisa. How much patience does she have between when she signed the contract and the first time she publishes a schedule or has a workforce planning meeting before she's going to give up on it? Is it 30 days? Is it 10 days? Is it 7 days? Is it 24 hours? And then I'm going to do something that I call a first impact success rate measurement. What percentage of my new customers achieve first impact within that time period? Let's 7 days. Oh, well, only half of my customers achieve first impact within that time period. How do I know? Because I'm measuring that event. I'm literally measuring contract signing. I'm measuring publishing the first, and only 50% of my customers get there within 7 days. All right, well, what can I do? Now I've got a baseline. What can I do? Well, maybe I go interview those customers. I figure out what's wrong. Maybe I watch their click streams. I figure out where they're getting stuck. I run an experiment and I say, hey, let's not authenticate to all the workday stuff in the beginning. Let's just do some other workaround, or let's upload a CSV file because it's taking too long for me to get approval for the workday authentic. I'm making all this stuff up, Mallory, but I come up with
Accurate.
yeah, I come up with hypotheses of like what could speed them up and what could get them to that first impact or aha moment sooner. Oh, I ran that experiment and now I'm 60% to get to first impact within 7 days. That's pretty good. Could I do anything else? Like, could I go department at a time, or could I go with a set of dummy data that allows them to just experience it, even though it's not their real data? I don't know. I'm making this up. Um, but if I can get to that first impact moment on a much more reliable basis, then two things. One, I'm way more confident about downstream retention, which I think is probably something that you're gunning for. Two, I've taught myself how to experiment my way towards delaboring, because it's probably the case that I had humans trying to talk Lisa through all those complexities and kind of get her to that first publication schedule. And now I'm trying to do it through some sort of automation or shortcutting, or and it's succeeding. Whoa, if I can automate that, what else could I automate? Could I automate renewals? Could I automate an expansion contract? Could I automate acquisition, which is actually the hardest thing to automate? But in your business, I wouldn't go there. I would focus on all the downstream stuff, the delaboring that I can do post contract signing.
That's
Yeah,
helpful.
just
Yeah.
following up on what Dave said, when one of my companies, they started doing what Dave outlined, which is number one, agree internally what is first impact. And you'll be amazed how many companies the executives don't agree on that, but agree on first impact, and then second started measuring it and actually presented in board meetings. And the first board meeting, the number was like almost like 1 million minutes or something. It was an astronomical number, and I'm thinking, what, this is just like way beyond. But at every board meeting, it was they showed the number, progressively got better, and then after several quarters, it really came down to a point where self-serve took off and sales took off, and even their sales-led growth took off as well, because the products just became that much easier to use. And so I was amazed, because when we first started seeing the numbers, you're thinking seems like such a challenge. But the CEO was just methodical and said, we are going to drive this, and then they just pushed the whole team.
Yeah, I guess you have two choices at that point. When you see that 1 million minute number, you can do the ostrich strategy and pretend like it doesn't exist. Like, I don't have friction. Like, what friction? I don't see any friction. Or you could start measuring it and trying to improve it over time, which obviously this company did, and it helped all areas of the business. Um, the second thing is less comfortable, but that's the way we optimize. That's the way you optimize other pieces of our business. Like, why not this piece?
And then the thing you brought up in the book, Dave, is the flip side of the metrics is, building the right organization.
Yeah.
And you had a very specific way of organizing a PLG team, and maybe you could talk about that. And you sort of alluded to it in the beginning when you talked about silos. Yes.
Totally. Um, so we're gonna to get PLG to work. Like Mallory, just taking your case, I'm going to need, in your case, I'm going to need customer success and engineering working together. And customer success kind of functionally is going to be a little resistant because it looks like I'm automating their job away. And engineering might be a little resistant because I'm not working on kind of my core roadmap. And so if I leave customer success in their silo and I leave engineering in their silo, I'm probably never going to get it done. They're all going to have reasons to work on kind of their normal day job. What I have to do is break those people out of their silos, put them onto a cross-functional team, which is generally these days called a growth team. And a growth team is defined as something that has go-to-market and engineering on the same team working for outcomes, not output, but outcomes. So in this case, I would make sure I have one or two engineers, a product manager, I would have a designer, and I may, Mallory, I'd either have or I'd conscript somehow a CS person onto that team, representing like what would in an acquisition be the marketing function, but here it's the onboarding function. Cool. Okay, so now I got a team of 5 people. I pull them out of their silos. I make them and I give them an objective, and that objective is to improve the first success rate. Okay, well, don't I have to go to my all hands engineering meetings? No. Don't I have to do what my boss in CS tells me to do? No, because right now you're on the growth team. What you're trying to do is achieve first impact success rate. And then that team actually can run really fast because they can control all the surfaces that are required. They control the process, the customer interaction, the product experience, because they have engineers that can actually do that. If I might have a designer that's actually helping me build new user experiences, and I'm just running these experiments, I'm taking the Workday authentication out of the flow. Well, wait a second, that's not our core product workflow. No, but it's what we're experimenting with to see if we can make it work. So these are called growth teams, Tehi, and they're
Mhm.
all over the hyper growth kind of hyperscalers that we know, especially the product led or AI led versions of them. And you can aim them at any objective. In this case, we're aiming it at onboarding, but I could also aim it at acquisition, or I could aim it um, at retention to improve my retention rates, or I could aim it uh, at expansion to improve my upsell rates. And they're allowed to work on any surface, but the key feature is that they are separated from the core engine and they're working on their own schedule. So they're not on a 6 week sprint. They're not on some sort of like, website update schedule. They're on their own schedule and they're running experiments that resolve every single week.
And so basically, you've created this cross-functional growth team, which is then matched with these, specific PLG North Star metrics that they're just running against to then build that successful PLG motion.
That's it. And you will get, let's assume everyone on the call is a CEO, and you've got people on your team, and you introduce this concept. You will get pushback because the people you put on that team, if you want to succeed, have to be best and brightest kind of growth mindset kind of people. They have to be. They have to be willing to kind of experiment and fail forward. And that's probably your best engineer. And it's probably your best marketer. And it's maybe your best kind of, customer success person or your best designer. And you can't spare those people, right? You need them in your business. So you're going to get pushback. Your head of engineering is going to say, I can't spare her, but I'll give you this engineer. Like, oh, that would be amazing if you would just take him off my hands. And those people won't be able to compete in this world. If you think about what you're trying to accomplish with PLG, you're trying to speed up your motions and you're trying to defend yourself against competitors who are also have high velocity motions. And those people have put their best people, those competitors are probably smaller than you, they're probably coming up from the bottom, and their whole company is a growth team. It's a 5-person growth team that can run super fast. So now you want to compete with them and make sure that they don't kind of attack you from below. You got to field a pretty good team. You can't field the junior varsity team and think that you're going to fend off your most aggressive competitor. You got to field a really good team. So Tay, the hardest thing, the 3 hard decisions here, if I'm a CEO, 1 is get in the right mindset, empathy, generosity metrics. 2, allocate the right talent. I actually do need to spare some best and brightest talent and put them into that structure that you talked about, Tay. And 3, I need to give it enough time. I can't run out of patience after 6 months and be like, well, no ARR, let's kill that experiment. That's just not the way the laws of physics work here. Once those flywheel's turning, it is very hard to stop, but it takes significant energy to get the flywheel turning for a self-service motion like the one that you proposed, Mallory. Like, it takes me a while. I might run 1, 2, 3 experiments. I've got to get kind of my feet under me. Then I start to see that compounding and impacting my renewal rates, and then I start to see it impacting my expansion rates, and then I'm like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? But it took me, it might take me a year to get there before I start seeing the actual kind of dollar signs based on renewal dates and expansion opportunities go up on the X or on the y-axis.
In the book, Dave, you go through many different success stories, whether it's Zoom, Atlassian, or others. For an audience, early stage companies, building their PLG motion now or wanting to build one now, of these, which success story do you feel would be most relevant, or that you would say that people should look into? Or do you think you need to take pieces of each one? I'm just curious.
Well, if I'm early stage and I'm just deciding how to get out of founder-led sales, and get to a repeatable go-to-market motion, I have a choice to make. Red pill, blue pill choice to make. I'm either going to go sales-led or product-led. And if I'm founding a company right now from zero, I don't think that's who we have on the call, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But if I'm founding a company from zero and I'm making that red pill, blue pill choice, I'm going to try to be as kind of AI and PLG native as possible. So that use case, that case study, Tehi, would be like Zoom. Um, Zoom completely took it to GoToMeeting and WebEx. Like they owned 80% of the enterprise market until a few years later they didn't, because Zoom just made it easy. It was feature light, it was friction free, and they just came and ate their lunch. That would be who I would study. Actually, today I would study Cursor, Lovable, Replit. These are companies that have zero friction in their onboarding process, zero human intervention in the initial kind of value delivery. They're actually not using AI to do the onboarding, surprisingly. Like, you sign up for ChatGPT or Lovable or Cursor, it's not a robot selling to you. You're literally just signing up in a PLG flow, and they're managing it and monitoring it, like just like a self-service Zoom flow. So if I'm starting from scratch, I just have to make that decision and then stick to it and gut it out. Let's
And
assume.
and there, what really drove them, like a curse, Zoom, and now a Cursor and so forth, is very fast, almost like immediate impact.
Right,
And then the second thing I think in the book you outlined is that to really just focus on one clear, simple use case,
right.
then try and do that extremely well, than trying to do like 10 use cases.
Yep, indeed. Um, so just sticking with that theme for a moment, Tehi,
Yeah.
those of us who are, I'm speaking about me, I'm 58 years old, right? So like I've seen a few things. PLG wasn't a thing when I started my career. AI, you know, generative AI wasn't a thing. AI was, but generative AI wasn't a thing when I started my career. So, so commercial mindset would say bigger contract is better, more features are better, bigger, more prestigious brands are better. That's why we had a $1.2 million ACV when we built that company that we sold to Oracle, because we were going for the biggest brands in the industry with really feature robust solutions that only we could deliver. That doesn't lend itself to a PLG go to market motion. It just doesn't. It's too hard. Like, it's too much bespoke selling, too much bespoke configuration, implementing, and deployment. So single use case would be much better. It would allow me to go faster. Um, let's assume though that we did not build in a PLG way, and now we're thinking maybe we want to. Um, I think the best example out of the book, Tehi, for that is HubSpot. I mean, I profiled many companies in there, three specifically, and then some others tangentially, that had already gotten to 100 million ARR and then added PLG, because I knew that 99% of the world, for 99% of the world, that's going to be the case. But HubSpot, is a classic case. Brian and Dharmesh had built a company, created a category, inbound marketing, owned the category, like leaders of that category. And Brian is then, meanwhile, looking over his shoulder to a different segment, not inbound marketing, not his own competitors. He's looking at Shopify, and he's like, wait a second. E-commerce platform is actually a pretty complex product, and somehow they're getting self-service starts on their platform. What, couldn't we do that? And he's jealous of Shopify. He's looking a little bit at Dropbox, but Shopify is more complex and more analogous to his marketing platform. He's like, we should be able to do that. But then he thought to himself, if I tried to do that in my company, it would get squashed before it got its legs under it. My head of sales would squash it right away, because that would be a threat. My head of engineering would squash it right away. So what Brian did is he said, I'm convinced. I'm convinced we can do this. And I'm so convinced that I'm actually going to lead a growth team. So he went and handpicked a couple of engineers. He was the product manager. He went and he actually handpicked a couple of humans that were like hybrid sales slash CS people. He carved them out of their former reporting silos. He handed the rest of HubSpot off to his COO, and he said, I'm going to go prove that this works. So that's a growth team. He didn't call it a growth team, but that's a cross-functional growth team. He had everything he needed. It had a CEO sponsorship, and they built. And
And about how big was that in the beginning?
in the beginning, he had 10 people, not 5 or 7. He had 10,
Okay.
but they grew it, and they grew it from 0 million to 10 million. And what he told me is he wanted, that was like a psychological kind of barrier, 10 million, not scientific, but he thought if I can get this to 10 million, then I can put it back into the
Mm.
core business and it won't get organ rejected. Like at that point, the CRO can't, launch a political campaign against the CTO can't launch a political campaign against it. And at that point, I think we could probably teach the core business some things that we learned while we were off kind of making this thing go. The one other thing that they did, and I learned this from MongoDB too, or sorry, yeah, MongoDB and also MuleSoft, is they decided to do a product that wouldn't compete with the core business. So that's another level of difficulty, but they launched their sales product, not their marketing product, but their sales product through this new go-to-market motion. And then when they brought it back into the business had two products. Now they had a marketing hub and a sales hub. The marketing hub had grown out of sales led. The sales hub had ironically grown out of product led. And now they were both available to be sold by the sales team. And they eventually both became available to activate via PLG. That's a great case study. I probably just told you all the details that are in the book, but you can study more by learning the history of that.
Any other questions people have about other companies? Because as I said, that I really like how Dave looked at these companies and then talked about their key learnings in the book. Um,
I'd love to hear what.
Hey, Dave, it's on here. Great insights. One question I have for you is, are there any scenarios where you would advise against PLG?
Um, that's a trick question. You're just trying to trip me up, aren't you, Juan? um, it is. I mean, there are definitely scenarios. There are definitely scenarios where it's difficult. Like I mean, to take the there's scenarios where it's difficult. And in the book, we tackle this too. Like, hey, what if I don't have a single use case, kind of easy to configure, quick to get started? End user is the same as the buyer situation. Those would be all the kind of ideal situations. What if I don't have that? So then I walk you through like a decision hierarchy. Like, okay, so it's not evident that my solution would work. Then then I encourage you to say, well, is there anyone in my market who is making self-service work? And the goal is not to
Hmm.
give myself an excuse for not doing it. The goal is just to see, like literally, is there anyone out there that's maybe doing a small set of what I'm doing, but doing it on a PLG basis? And if the answer is yes, then I do think that that's a mandate. I got to go figure that out. And what I say in that case is start out, start copy. Like you don't have to reinvent it. If somebody else in your space is making it work, like let's say I'm in the financial ERP space, and I see these, and let's say I'm the modern version of it. I'm Workday or something. I'm the modern version of it, and then I see a company uh, like Divvy or Ramp coming up, and they're not doing financial ERP. They're literally just doing expense reimbursement, but they're doing it on a PLG basis. Ooh, could I do that? Could I start copy that? Like, or am I going to wait for Divvy and Ramp to get so expensive that I can't buy them? Like, maybe I could go start with a subset. Um, but let's say that's not what you asked. You're like, is there any time that I wouldn't do it? Let's say there's nobody doing anything in my space. I'm a highly regulated space. Maybe I'm in medical. Maybe I'm in financial services. Maybe I'm serving government. There's nobody that's penetrating this space with any sort of anything, even a subset. Then I just got to make a choice. Am I going to be the first? And am I going to
Mhm.
go, spend 1 to 3 years experimenting my way, or am I just going to keep paying attention and then be a fast follower? That's a strategy decision.
Okay, got it. Related to that, let's say your product will work better or optimal when, you've kind of had a forward deployed engineer on site working with the customer, fine-tuning things. But would you maybe start off with a PLG motion where a user, maybe an executive, could come and sign up, just do a simple integration and kind of use your product almost like not at its optimal, and then try to hook them and then drive them towards more of like a, okay, well, if you want to like really get the most out of our product, you will need like a forward deployed engineer and more complex integrations.
I mean, that's literally what OpenAI did, right?
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
literally. Like they didn't go straight to the enterprise use cases. They did a retail launch 3 years ago, and you and I signed up, and we are like, "Whoa, this is crazy." But they didn't have enterprise tools or APIs or MCPs or forward deployed engineers. But you and I got really, really interested in it. And then they
Yep.
started adding those kind of capabilities. Whoa, what's MCP? What does that stand for? What is that? Whoa, wow, who could help me do that? Oh, a forwarded. Oh, could I do an enterprise contract? And then all of a sudden you've got like, you've got Microsoft or not or McKinsey spending like almost $1 billion with them because of that motion. I don't know your business, but I do think that's logical. Like if you could figure that out, and streamline just pieces of that, I mean, I don't know it. You might not do a student body left, like let's go build our whole company that way based on how
Yeah.
much you've already got on the go, but you might allocate in the McKinsey Three Horizon model, 70% on your core business, 20% optimizing what you're doing, 10% on your kind of groundbreaking, could change the whole game type, investments. You might take that 10% and say, what could I do here? Could I get any signals of success? And I'm talking a lot, I know, but um, here's another example that I studied in the book. I wasn't able to put the whole thing in the book, but you could look at too. This is not an AI forward kind of company. In fact, it's the most monolithic version of software on the whole planet is SAP. So, what does
Hmm.
SAP do? Like what they're doing, they've literally built, and I've been through this flow. They built a sandbox with dummy data that CEO would never go in there, but a head of ops might go in there and just say, hey, what would it look like if I had SAP running? I know this isn't my data, but let me click around. Let me see what it looks like. Let me see what the dashboards are. Ooh, that's interesting. Then they have a cloud based version that you can connect with some of your core systems and start looking at it with your data. It's still not a full implementation. And then you go to kind of the upgrade to the kind of full Monty, still cloud
Yeah.
based, and start connecting it. Just some ideas.
That's really interesting. So is that like a hybrid PLG start and then it flows towards more like an enterprise sales type of deal?
Indeed. So,
Okay.
what what we, the word for that, I love your example of forward deployed engineers. It's great. And I think we're figuring a lot of this stuff out as we go. But people talk about something called PLS, product led sales. So the guy that wrote the
Mhm.
forward for my book is a guy named Rob Gilio. He's the CCO of Canva, and they pursue a PLS strategy. So all their starts are PLG, but for a subset of those starts, they track two things. One is this a core ICP customer? Like, is this Citigroup or ConocoPhillips or Nationwide Bank? Like, oh wow, okay, cool. So that's a core fit customer that I actually want to manage in a hands-on way. And two, what's the readiness? So fitness, core ICP, readiness, they're achieving benefit from the solution already. Like I can see it in the numbers. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to have a human show up, maybe with in the Canvas case, they don't have a forward deploy engineer in their hip pocket, but maybe in your case you would. And that human says, hey, I see that you're achieving XYZ with this. How can I help you? Can we help you with integrations? Can we help you with deployment? Can we help you? There's some features I see you haven't activated. Can I show you a dashboard? Like, and so they don't show up with a quota mindset. They show up with a helping mindset, and then they blow that customer into a larger enterprise deployment. And that in the industry is, at least for now, called product led sales.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Dave. Um, great insights here. One of the questions that we have kind of touched on a little bit is when the buyer versus the user is not the same person.
Yeah.
So two things, what kind of challenges you see in that model, and what are some of the tips, techniques that have worked well in that kind of scenario?
I think that's one of the hardest challenges. Regulation is another really big challenge, but when the buyer's not the user, big challenge. So I'm working with a company right now where that is indeed the case. And what we're trying to do, so the case study in the book is MuleSoft. Um, so MuleSoft is a big, heavy deployment. You have to get approval. It's a six-figure commitment. You've got to get approval that it can go into your information architecture. It's going to talk to all of your most critical data systems like that. That's not PLG. But what they did is they said, hey, there's a single use case. It's called getting data in and out of Salesforce that every single Salesforce admin struggles with. It's very hard. At least at the time it was very hard. I think it still is pretty hard, but it was extremely hard. So they built something called Salesforce Data Loader, and they called it it's a sidecar product. It wasn't directly attached to their footprint. It didn't drag the whole MuleSoft footprint in. It literally just got data in and out of Salesforce. So they did that work for you. It ended up getting in the hands of lots of users. Those users were now prospects. I could now prospect into that user and talk to them about, if you like this, you might like this, and then they could go advocate for me and get up to the budget owner, and I could have a conversation about MuleSoft. So in a way, it's kind of like we were talking about with Juan, where it's a product-led sale at this point. I still have to get to the budget owner, but the initial hook was with a user on just a very small subset of functionality.
It's like landing with PLG and expanding with SLG.
That's one idea, yeah. Because I don't think if you got a six-figure sale, you're probably selling to people who don't log into software. That's going to be tough. Maybe they care about dashboards and you can suck them in, but you might have to go click down in the org and find some use case that would help develop advocates within the organization.
Well, I think we're running out of time. So let's go into the last topic, which is sort of how you see AI impacting PLG.
Tay, I love I think you should start. I endorse your point of view. Do you want to start with that, or do you want me to butcher it?
No. Please go ahead. I think, yeah.
I mean, so Tay's got this cool kind of two-dimensional chart with go-to-market complexity on the y-axis, more complex like the SAP stuff at the top, less complex like the Dropbox stuff at the bottom, and then go-to-market productivity on the x-axis. Basically I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort, on the left-hand side, and I'm going to get more and more productive as I go to the right. Okay, cool. So it's very hard to be top right, super complex and super productive, to your point, Kumar. Like, I've got a really complex sale, I can't hand it off to robots. Okay. But AI can demystify a lot of things. Like, I just talked to a company, I think it was earlier this week, 300,000 customers who are plumbers, window washers, like handymen, 300,000 customers. And the way they got to 300,000 customers is they let AI do the initial use case to configuration steps. So they decomplexified that configuration step so that each of those plumbers could land into a template that they could use on their own. Each of those window washers landed into a template that they could use on their own. And AI did some of that work that was formerly done by humans. Now you think about, well, could that great for plumbers and window washers, but that actually seems simple compared to process manufacturing. Like this company that I'm working with is process manufacturing, like literally making plastic bottles in giant factories. Yeah, but AI can take a lot of that complexity out too. Like, tell me what your manufacturing planning system is. Tell me what machinery you have. Okay, cool. Let me go give you the drivers that connect those machines, and then let me activate your first dashboard within 7 days. Like, what? Like, enterprise software is not supposed to be that easy, but but AI can decomplexify a lot of the go-to-market and just kind of streamline stuff. Even if it's not on the acquisition front, it could be on the configuration or issue resolution front or renewals or expansions. I often think about renewals and expansions as the lowest hanging fruit. I've already got the contract written. I've already got the solution configured. All I have to do is just say, yes, I'll take another year. Like, why do we need a human in that conversation? I know the CRO will say, oh, because otherwise I'll miss an expansion opportunity. Okay, got it. But every single time, how about I let 70% of them go through automatically and I let you talk to the big ones that are high fit, high readiness, to your point, Juan, even around the renewal, and the other 70% I just automate. Like that would be something. But I think AI can take complexity away and further and give me access to more and more formerly inaccessible corners of the market. Mickey, I see your hand.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Obviously passionate about PLG myself. I think there's like in B2B, that's very definitely different complexity we're facing, right? Because we have different personas and the complexity is part of the tool. It's like, we offer operational features by design. So I felt like in the past that number one thing to worry about in PLG is like the sign up, the awareness to drive. Most PLG companies just have that going, and that's a lot either paid media, organic. That's like without sign up, there's nothing to automate, right? It's like um, I do think that today, because PLG for B2B is very, very hard because you have this like setup and then onboarding. There's a lot of operational features. But if your product is actually something that the customer expect, like HubSpot you mentioned, is like at some point marketing automation was a decision everybody's taking. The question was which one, right? CRM is a decision everybody's taking. The question is which one? Then PLG, reducing friction, is Zoom, by the way. Everybody was using something. And then you come in and you start from acquisition. And that's what Monday, by the way, did, or Zoom did. I do feel like in B2B, it was always very, very challenging because the time to first value is just like, and it's not a single event. The impact was usually a combination of things, and the outcome was the most important thing. I think coming AI changes the game and truly allows PLG for B2B. Because as you said, AI can reduce friction dramatically. If I sign up and I need to learn your setup, it's game over. But if I sign up and there's a co-pilot basically guiding me and doing it with me, that suddenly unlocks everything, right? I can set it up. Second, usually it's like we saw that retention. I'm coming from Gainsight, by the way. So this is why so retention was tied to outcome, not necessarily usage, because it depends what type of usage, right? If they just use your low level features. So they measured outcomes and usually tied to do they use the powerful features. But to use the powerful features, we measure and say only 10% of the customers actually made it to master a product. And then they use the powerful features and then retention was rising. So I think, again, with AI, everybody's becoming a master because you prompt and then the agent is actually performing. I don't even care today which feature is it using. It's going to use the best way. I think today PLG is now available for B2B in much more practical way because I think optimizing that and trying to reduce features, it's very, very hard. It's like to simplify a UI for B2B that needs operational features. It's not a trivial task, but with AI, it can definitely happen. So I think those just wanted to kind of address some of the things you said from my perspective. And by the way, user sentiment is also something I recommend like really collecting. We saw the watermelon effect. It looks green. Usage is amazing. They hate the project. They just hate the product. In Marketo, it happened a lot. Like they use it a lot. And then when I had a survey and like, no, this is like takes too long to load. And we had to re-platform Marketo completely at some point. So just B2B is definitely different challenge. But today, I believe with AI, as you said, totally something that worth a shot because AI takes a lot of the heavy burden and the delaboring. I love that term as well.
Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Chris.
Well, I think we're out of time. So last point just here is first, I want to thank Dave for participating and sharing his thoughts, and also if anyone wants to reach out to you, Dave, what's the best way for people to contact you?
Amazing. So LinkedIn is great. I do have a Substack called Product Led GTM. And I really do think if you're interested in this, I try to write the best book to help kind of answer the exact questions that you guys are asking, at least at a certain level. And I still stand by it. I think it's a good book. It comes out on audio on February 3rd. It's available in hard copy now. I would start there and then follow me on LinkedIn and let's connect. I'd love to hear more about what you're working on.
Okay, so with that, Dave, thank you very much. Really appreciate your making time and also writing the book. Okay, thank you very much.